Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. It is over. It is done. The 2023 NBA Finals are in the books. And for the first time in their 47-year history, the Denver Nuggets are the champions of the National Basketball Association, defeating the Heat in just 5 games. Final score of the game last night to cap it off in Denver, 94-89 in the pretty much an ugly rock fight of a game. And it just really wasn't that entertaining of a series, Sap. We saw really outstanding play from the Finals MVP, Nikola Jokic, a couple of really good games from Jamal Murray. And other than that, there really weren't that many highlights to talk about. So we're not going to spend a really long time dissecting every single game of this finals, but hats off to Denver. You predicted them at the beginning of the season. You backed off a little bit in the playoffs, Sap, but ultimately we'll just forget about that and just say, nice job on the prediction at the beginning of the season, Sap.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So before the season started, I picked them at 22-1 to win the NBA championship. I wish I was still a betting man.
Ooh,
I would have
yeah.
made some good money, but I stopped doing that, I don't know, about a decade ago. So that was probably the wise decision a decade ago to no longer bet. But they clearly were the best team throughout this postseason. Now, the takeaway I will have is that they also had the easiest route to a championship of any team I can remember in the last 30 or 40 years. And I can't even go back further than that to find a team that had everything laid out for them. They beat 2 8 seeds, a 7 seed. So those 3 teams had to get in through a play in, and they beat a 4 seed. You look at the 4 teams they beat: Minnesota, Phoenix, the Lakers, Miami. Those 4 teams' cumulative record during the regular season was 174 and 154, which is only a 53% winning percentage. They were outstanding in the postseason, but they also had a very, very open road, and they took advantage of it. Kudos to them. And Nikola Jokic stepped up and played the way a guy who is now considered the best player in basketball should, and they deserve to be champions. But it did open up for them very nicely, really, from the get-go.
Absolutely. It opened up really nicely for them. And as you said, Seth, they took advantage, and we've seen that in the past. And now maybe this was an easier path, as you're saying, than what we typically see. But with NBA champions, almost always something has to or does break for them eventually, whether it's injuries to another team, team getting surprisingly knocked out. That happens. Now, it seemed to happen excessively for Denver, and really in the finals to get an 8 seed Miami Heat is just so unusual. But the key is they took advantage, and you play the schedule that's laid out in front of you. It's not Denver's fault that the teams in the Western Conference wilted, and then the Celtics and the Bucks couldn't get the job done against the Miami Heat, and they would have presented a lot more challenge for Denver, I would assume. But listen, today it's just a party in Denver. They couldn't care less who they beat. And it's really a testament to, I think, team building, in that, the Nuggets stuck with this team, made a little tweak here, a little tweak there, and ultimately that's what paid off for them, and that they are the champions today, Sap.
Yeah, the building blocks, obviously, Nikola Jokic, a 2-time MVP, Jamal Murray, who, by the way, has never made an all-star team. I think in the future he probably will, but he steps up in the postseason. They took a chance on Michael Porter Jr., drafting him when he had an injury-plagued freshman year at Missouri, and most teams had him off their draft board. He wasn't all that good in this series, but then they also traded for Aaron Gordon, which worked out well for them in his second year with the Nuggets. He stepped up big time, especially in Game 4 of the finals. And then you sign a few veterans like Bruce Brown, KCP, and they all kind of fit in nicely. It was good team building, and they deserve this championship. When they hand out the rings in a few months and raise the banner sometime in October, no one's going to remember who they beat to win that championship. And now you've got the Denver Nuggets winning their first championship. You also have Stan Kroenke, who in the last 16 months has won a Super Bowl with the Rams, a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche, and now as owner of the Denver Nuggets. So he's on quite a roll right now.
Yeah, not bad. He's got a pretty good life. No big deal. Just a multi times infinity billionaire whose teams all win. Not bad for Stan Kroenke. But yeah, it's like you said, Sap. No one's gonna really remember who the path or whatever. They're gonna say, "Hey, look at that banner up there. It's the first one we hung up there. Remember how awesome that was?" And the biggest takeaway, Sap, and what we really want to talk about as a result of this finals isn't so much, okay, how did Denver make adjustments? What did they do to get to this point? It's that, where does Nikola Jokic now rank on a historic basis? Because he had a historic run to get to this point in winning the championship and finishing the postseason leading the NBA in points, rebounds, assists. He was the top guy for all three of those categories, Sep, at the end of the day, which is pretty remarkable, especially considering that Denver had a sweep in the conference finals, won this in 5, and won the first round in 5 too. So it's not like he played a lot more games to get to this point. He just was just dominant and capped off last night, 28 points, 4 assists, which is not a great night for him. 4 assists and 16 rebounds. And like you said, Sap, a minute ago, I think he's now taken the crown from Giannis as the best player on earth.
He put up these numbers in 20 games, which is the same amount of games that the Boston Celtics played in losing in the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, he took care of business quickly. 5 games against Minnesota, 6 against Phoenix, swept the Lakers in 5 games against Miami. And right now, that's the discussion. Is Nikola Jokic the best player in basketball? We had this discussion 2 years ago once Giannis won his first championship and his only championship so far. He kind of took control of that title as the best player in the world. And I think now Nikola Jokic can be termed the best player in the world. It's one of those two guys. And I always push back to not give it to Jokic because he's not a great defender and Giannis is a great defender, but Giannis can't shoot like this guy. So they're both phenomenal players who have a weakness. I mean, Jokic is not a great defender. Giannis not a really good outside shooter. That's why they're not at the level of, say, LeBron or Michael Jordan, who could do it all on a basketball court.
Right.
In terms of him being an all-time great, certainly I would put him now in my top 30, probably somewhere in the mid-20s, low 20s. And I think you could kind of put him in the same group with Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, David Robinson, Kevin Garnett, and Giannis, and Dirk as well. I think those 7 guys are all kind of clustered together. Now, Barkley and Karl Malone never won championships, but Barkley did win an MVP. He was an incredible player. Malone won 2 MVPs, never won that championship. And the rest of those players won MVPs, won a championship at least. So I think those 7 guys are all kind of clustered together. Now, obviously, Jokic is so young and Giannis is still young that they could certainly move up the rankings. But that's where I put Jokic right now as one of the all-time greats to ever play this game.
Where was he, Sap, on your list before the finals?
He was outside of that because I think that kind of jumps him into that category. And look, he's still got a lot to do because he's still a young guy. He's only 28 years old, and he plays such an effortless game that I think he can play at this level for another 5 years. He doesn't look like a guy that's the best conditioned athlete, but does he ever look like he's not well conditioned? I mean, he's just one of those kind of freakish
42 minutes last night. 42 minutes, was out there pretty much the whole game.
Yeah, and in the prior game, he sprained his ankle. He was in foul trouble. I mean, he doesn't have the same physique as Giannis or certainly Dwight Howard or anyone like that. But, he gets up and down the court at his own speed and takes care of business. So I would have had him outside of that. But once you win that championship, now you're in that same group with those players that I mentioned. Obviously, contemporary of his is Giannis at this point. Embiid's not at that level because Embiid has never been past the second round. He does finally have an MVP that he can put into the discussion, but the other players that I mentioned, I think they're all really, really close. I think Jokic is actually ahead of Dirk because I don't know if Dirk was ever considered the best player in basketball. He did win an MVP, did win a championship, but I don't remember at any point him being considered the best player in basketball. And it's kind of interesting, Jet, because I know we're going to talk about could Jokic become the face of the league. That's a totally different discussion. But Jordan was the best player and the face of the league for about 10 years. There was about a 9-year gap until LeBron took hold of both being the best player and the face of the league. And I know Steph Curry's also the second face of the league right now. There was about an 8-9 year gap where Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kobe Bryant were in discussion of who is the best player in basketball.
Right.
And it kind of went back and forth depending on who won the championships. In 8 of those 9 years, either Shaq or Duncan won a championship. And of course, Kobe was in the mix. The only team that interrupted that run, the 04 Detroit Pistons, they didn't have any player even at that level. As far as the face of the league, I would say at that point it was probably Shaq and Kobe, never Duncan because of lack of personality. I don't think Jokic will ever be the face of the league because compared to Jokic, Tim Duncan is Chris Rock. I mean, Jokic is the most unassuming superstar I've ever seen in any sport. Like, he forgot that he had won the MVP of the finals. He left it behind. He's more concerned with seeing his horses in Serbia than he is in going to this parade on Thursday in Denver. He again makes Duncan seem like a diva, which is saying a lot since Duncan's always been the most unassuming, humble superstar we've ever seen in the league. So I don't think Jokic can ever be the face of the league, but certainly he's right there with Giannis as the best player. And I'd say he's the best player now because he is the champion.
Yeah, I saw somebody tweeted out last night that Jokic celebrated like it was a Tuesday night win in Orlando. But hey, listen, not everybody has to be the same, and make it seem like life and death. I think he is an extremely competitive guy, loves basketball. He's just, he doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve, and that's fine. But Sap, I think another thing that goes in his favor is that he didn't wilt at all in the finals or in the playoffs. Like you said, he was excellent, and he comes up with the Finals MVP. And this is coming from Statitudes. Jokic, just the 11th player to win multiple regular seasons season MVPs, and Finals MVP honors. The other 10, Sap: Kareem, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, Tim Duncan, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Moses Malone, Giannis, and Steph Curry. Not a bad list to be a part of.
No, that's a pretty good list. I mean, that seems to represent a lot of my top 10 or 15 because I'm a big Moses Malone fan. I think he's the most overlooked, overlooked player in the history of the sport because he played kind of an ugly game and he was playing at the same time when Kareem was dominant and was so graceful, and Bird and Magic kind of ceded the mantle of being the best player in basketball. And, he was before Jordan, and that was a completely different look from Moses Malone to Michael Jordan. But yeah, this is an incredible list now that Nikola Jokic is on. And I think you were on Jokic before I was. Like, I always kind of push back, and I would see him play, and I was impressed. Obviously, incredible basketball IQ and real subtle athletic skills, incredibly coordinated. Like I said last week in the podcast, it never appears that he takes a bad shot. Like, every shot of his looks like it's going in. Even the misses are pretty. Kind of like how Kevin McHale was for 10, 12 years. Like, never puts up a brick. Has excellent footwork. He's not fast, but he's nimble. Totally different skill set. So I'm now on board with this guy being an all-time great. And right now I would say, yes, he's the best player in basketball because we've seen what Giannis has done since winning his championship, and it's been somewhat disappointing in a sense. Lost in the second round to the Celtics as the defending champ, and then losing in the first round this year to this Miami team that just got swamped by Denver. That's not a great look for Giannis. As great as a player as he is, I'd say right now Nikola Jokic, best player in basketball. Now, next year, we could have a totally different discussion depending on who wins the championship. It's in that same vein as it was from the late 90s to, I'd say, around 2007, when who is the best player in basketball could change from year to year based on who won the championship.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. As a player gets better or makes changes to their game, you can evaluate them differently. Jokic has improved season to season, even though he didn't win MVP this year and won it the prior 2 years. I think you could say he's the best version of himself right now. In fact, I would say that. So I think that's totally fair. And as you mentioned, Sap, him and Giannis, there's both holes in their game. That's why there's tiers to these all-time great rankings. Jordan, LeBron are at the very tippy top of the list because the holes in their game are either kind of non-existent or just so subtle that it never affected them doing anything they needed to do. Like, Giannis's shooting has sometimes hurt the Bucks. In prior years, Jokic's defense had hurt the Nuggets. LeBron's lack of three-point shooting for most of his career hasn't hurt them at all. Michael Jordan, whatever flaw you want to say, the fact that he was an a-hole didn't really hurt the Bulls. Again, that's why there's tiers to it. But I think why I was in on Jokic early, and there were a lot of people who were too, Sep, is that, well, for me personally, my two favorite things, attributes of a basketball player, defense. I love defense, and passing. I am a sucker for a great passer. And so while Jokic doesn't have the defense, he's the best passing big man there's ever been. I don't think that's a debate at this point. And he's the most unique passer in the NBA, maybe that I've ever seen, because of his size. And he's just able to do things that you've never sort of thought before because you mentioned this a couple podcasts ago, Sap. He is a basketball genius. His basketball IQ is off the charts, and he's incredibly creative. And so when you put those two things together, plus his size, you're seeing things that you don't see on a basketball court before. And because of that, he's able to make all these teammates around him better. And that's why I think he elevates over Giannis right now as the best player in the world, because Giannis's defense was making his team better. But now Jokic, if you look at the passing and say, okay, the defense isn't great, but the passing is making all these guys around him so much better because he's finding them open looks. It's really something that stands out into his favor that I don't think really anybody else in the NBA is doing right now as a passer. LeBron did for most of his career. I don't know that he has that ability anymore. He's still a terrific passer, but to make those teammates so much better because of his passing, that's Jokic right now. And I don't know how many other players, if any, can do that right now.
I would say none, because some of his passes, you look at it and you're saying to yourself, where's that pass going? And then all of a sudden, someone's open, catches it in the shooting pocket, and hits a jump shot. It's almost the way we marveled at the likes of, say, like Wayne Gretzky or Mario Lemieux or Bobby Orr in hockey, where they were just so many steps ahead of everyone else that they just stunned you with their brilliance. And that's what Jokic is right now. Also, what makes him so unique, look, we've played 76 years in the NBA. Not that you or I have played, but 76 years of basketball in the NBA. And I don't know if I've ever seen or can ever recall someone who could lead the league in rebounding and assist in the same season. Now, I know historians will say, well, Wilt Chamberlain did it, but Wilt did it in terms of total assists, not assists per game, because Wilt never missed games. So I think he led the league in assists one year when his average was like 5.7 assists per game, because he just woke up at the beginning of the season and said, I'm going to lead the league in assists. Jokic could do both of those things. Larry Bird was another guy who probably could have done that, but he was too much of a scorer to necessarily lead the league in assists, although on any given night he'd have double-digit assists because he had teammates around him that could put the ball in the basket, because it is a dependent stat. You know, you can have a guy have 4 assists and he's still making the same passes, just no one's making the shots. That's the case last night. They only scored 94 points. Neither team could shoot, so there are not going to be a lot of assists in that particular game. But Jokic has that type of ability as a great rebounder and a great passer. We've seen guys, Tiny Archibald actually led the league in scoring and assist in the same season. Harden, Westbrook, and LeBron have won scoring titles and assist titles, but rebounding title and assist title in the same year, this is probably the only guy in the history of the sport that could pull that off.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's not how the game was like envisioned. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Like it's spectacular to watch. Because like the shortest guy on the court is the guy who's the ball handler and passing the ball. Well, the Nuggets run an offense kind of like NFL team. Get the ball, he's the quarterback. He kind of takes the hike at the top of the key and then just sort of stands around and waits for people to cut, and then he'll find the right guy. He's throwing passes to open receivers essentially. And because of his height and his creativity and ability to manipulate the ball, it works pretty much every single time. There's no stopping it. I like, it's almost like Sap. I think we said this when we were previewing the finals. It's like the worst thing you can do is double him, because then somebody's automatically open, and he's tall enough and creative enough where he's not going to miss that guy. So okay, you double him, you're basically giving them a free basket. You don't double him, he's seeing the court better, and then he can take his guy one-on-one. He's basically an impossible cover.
He is. Then if you play a zone, he'll carve you up the way a great quarterback carves up a zone. We saw Tom Brady for more than 20 years. You play zone against him, he just nickel and dimes you down the field. Next thing you know, he's in the end zone. If you put too much pressure on him and blitz, well, he can beat you deep. So it's pick your poison. Same thing with Jokic. He is exactly like an NFL quarterback. Like nothing seems to phase him. He's in complete control of the situation. It's almost laughable watching him play, though, because he almost looks like the old guy at the Y who you look at and say, well, he's not all that good. And at the end of the run, you're like, man, that guy just dominated us. And it wasn't really painful. Like, it wasn't like he exploded by us. He wasn't, hitting necessarily trick shots or anything like that. It's just that his team won. And that's what makes him so unique. It really is fun to watch because you just don't see that. It's always been a sport of athleticism. Right. And here's a guy who is a very good athlete at 6'11", 285 pounds. You have to be an exceptional athlete to get up and down the court. And then his footwork is outstanding. His hand-eye coordination, outstanding. His foot-eye coordination, which is something that you see more in soccer or tennis, is at the highest level. And by the way, not a bad couple of days for Serbia, a country of 7 million people, right? Jokic wins the NBA championships, is the Finals MVP, and his countryman Nikola Jokic, Novak Djokovic, goes out and wins his 23rd Grand Slam title, all while Tom Brady is in his box, which makes all the sense in the world, right? Brady shows up to the French Open to support Novak Djokovic, and of course Djokovic wins yet another Grand Slam. I'm surprised Brady wasn't in Denver last night cheering on Jokic. But yeah, it's a pretty good day, 2-day period for a small country like Serbia. But yeah, this is just such a unique player. And again, I just will push back that he'll ever be the face of the league, Jet, because I don't want to sound xenophobic. I don't know if a foreign-born player can be the face of the league. The two most likely candidates would be who? Giannis and Luka, because they have the personality. But I still think that there's an appetite for some American player getting into debate of being the best player in the league. And again, LeBron and Steph will kind of put them to the side as being in the argument for the best player in the league. On any given night, they can still do that. And they're still the faces of the league. But looking forward, could Jokic be the face of the league? No, he just couldn't, because he's
I don't think he wants to be.
back. No, he's heading back to Serbia to hang out with his horses. That's like the last thing on his mind. I mean, he's got his two crazy brothers with him who I think have all the personality in the family. And Nikola's, I think, the middle son, which sets you up with a different set of circumstances. And he just kind of goes along and does his thing on the basketball court. It's fascinating to watch.
I love the crazy brothers. They were heave-hoing Mike Malone up in the air during the post-game celebration.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's something. Yeah, I agree. I don't think he could be the face of the NBA, but I also think to be the face of the NBA, you have to want to, and he has absolutely no interest in that. And two guys that we were talking about potentially as being the face of the NBA, the 2019 draft class top 2 picks, Zion Williamson and John Morant. Well, they're not going to be the face of the NBA anytime soon. John Morant, we may not see for another year, based off of what the hell suspension is going to happen to him. And Zion Williamson has apparently impregnated every porn star, east of the Mississippi. So it's not been the NBA is going to have to figure out who their face is going to be after LeBron and Curry hanging up.
Right. I mean, here are two guys that are going into their 5th year. You would think at this point they're building the resume to now start to contend for a championship and build their brand and maybe be the heir apparent from LeBron, Steph Curry to becoming the faces of the league. They both have the game to do that. I mean, Giannis has missed 2/3 of his potential start, so he's just not on the court enough. Zion has. John Morant has missed some games with a suspension, some injuries, and all of those things. Zion is like a superhero, has got a great personality, a great smile, but appears to want to be Will Chamberlain. And I'm not talking about being a 100-point scorer. I'm talking about, sleeping with 20,000 women. Good for him. And John Morant apparently wants to be Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, waving guns and doing that type of thing. So here are two guys, again, going into their 5th year. They should be looking at maybe contending for a championship. And yet we're hearing all these stories about Zion, and Ja is going to get suspended. That's going to drop probably Friday, I would think. A typical news drop. Right. Yeah. Like 4:30 on Friday that the NBA will announce what the suspension is. And it's too bad. Maybe these two guys need a change of scenery. I don't know. They both have huge contracts. There's a lot of money on the table between their contracts, their sneaker deals, because they should be the next group of guys that can be in that debate of being the faces of the league, because they have that type of personality. You said it. You have cousins, nephews, whatever, that are 12, 13 years old. Their favorite player is John Morant, because John Morant, to me, is similar to Allen Iverson, Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, incredibly athletic guards that play their asses off, right? And are really fun to watch. Zion's in that debate because, again, he's like a superhero. And yet they have so many problems off the court that they have to resolve that it kind of delays their becoming the next faces of the league.
Yeah, and I think, this summer we'll do a separate podcast completely on this 2019 draft class, which, was so hyped and has really become just a mess. Just because of what's happened at the top, and other guys have flamed out, and it's been troublesome. So again, that's sort of for another day. But yeah, the Zion and the John Morant stuff, and it's only we're gonna find out more about The like you said, the suspension for Ja imminently. Zion, we don't know when he's going to be on the court again because he's never healthy. And by the time he's on the court again, he may have 15 kids for all we know. I don't know. It's bad. It's not what the NBA wants in the players representing the league. It's sort of a throwback to when the league had a really negative perception about it, about players in the league being not good role models. Have been able to shed that, but this is exactly what they don't want, Sap.
Remember when they came into the league, the comparison with Zion was Sean Kemp. Well, that's becoming a comparison
Yeah.
off the court as well. Sean Kemp is the father of our country. And the comparison from Ja was to Allen Iverson, right? And we know Iverson had a lot of problems off the court as well. So not only on the court, but off the court, they are kind of channeling Sean Kemp and Allen Iverson.
Yeah, that's not what you want. But in terms of looking at the future, we don't have to look at the future of those guys, but we can look at the future of the league next year since the season is over and the Nuggets are champions. So before we finish up, we thought it'd be fun to take a look at what the very early betting odds are, before the draft, before free agency and trade season and stuff like that, and how it opened up. This is from betonline.ag. And the Nuggets are opening up as the favorite, Sep. No surprise there at 4-1. And after them are the Boston Celtics at 13-2, followed by the Milwaukee Bucks at 8-1, and the Mavericks and the Suns at 9-1, Sap. So, and your Lakers, by the way, 14-1 with Philadelphia.
Yeah, very interesting. Obviously, the Celtics are always up there because everyone's in agreement how good their roster is. They've added a couple of veteran assistants to try to help Joe Mazzulla. We'll see what they do with the roster in the offseason, but they're obviously a very talented roster. Same thing with Milwaukee. I mean, they had the two best records in basketball this year. So you would think coming back that maybe they right the ship and contend. Let's not forget Denver after the bubble had a couple of disappointing runs in the playoffs, right? They lost 1 year in the second round, 1 year in the first round. So going into this season, they look like an underachieving team, and they finally put it together. So as far as looking ahead to next year, I like to always look at teams that are in the 22-1, 25-1 range. Again, I picked the Nuggets before the season to win the championship. I got to keep patting myself on the back because I'm never right. And I think tore my rotator cuff doing that. But I like Cleveland because I was on Cleveland at the beginning of last season. I thought that they could make it to the finals, and they got upset by the Knicks in the first round, and they played poorly in that first round. I'm not sure what happened because Donovan Mitchell has generally been a good playoff performer. They need to tweak that roster. They need some help from the wing position, which there are a lot of wings out there. Good 3-and-D guy. If they can add that, I think Cleveland can certainly be a contending team. If I'm looking for someone who's more in the middle of the pack, I would say Cleveland. And then we've got to see what happens with Philadelphia and Phoenix. One rumored trade could be Chris Paul going from Phoenix to Philadelphia for James Harden. That would be interesting. It could blow up both teams, or it could help both teams.
As you mentioned, Cleveland 25-1 odds. I think that's pretty good, Sap. In terms of the 76ers, as I mentioned, 14-1. In terms of those long shots, because Denver was the middle of the pack, like you said, but 22-1, Sap, before the season started.
Yeah.
It's Miami, that's where they sit at 22-1. I would not be shocked at all if Miami makes a big move this offseason and gets another all-star caliber player to play next to Jimmy Butler. So that could be nice. That number would, if they were to acquire a Dame Lillard, that number would shoot way the hell up there. So you might want to look at Miami at 22-1 right now while you still can. Sacramento, who was the darling of the NBA last year, they were 33-1. They are 33-1 just with the New York Knicks. Knicks, another team that could make a big trade that could change their fortune, Sap. So there's some decent odds out there for those people who don't want to just bet on the favorites. And the team that has the lowest odds, Sap, Detroit at 400-1, Charlotte at 300-1, Washington at 200-1.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those ones obviously are not worth investing in, to say the least. So without question, you go more middle of the pack, and I think you can find someone in there that offers some value.
Yeah, it's I don't think. Okay, so Denver 4-1. They're not the heavy favorites. And I don't think next year a team's going to come in and say, like the Warriors were coming in year after year, and the Cavs with LeBron or the Heat with LeBron, were saying, okay, well, those teams are going to the finals. You look at the pack. I don't know that Denver is going to repeat. I don't know that Denver's going to get back to the NBA Finals next year. Like you
True.
said at the top, Sap, it was a pretty nice and easy path for them. As for the Celtics, who the hell knows what they are the most frustrating team and unpredictable team in the NBA. And so maybe the Warriors, Sap, maybe they just took a year off and they get back to it. They're 12-1. It's a very, very open field. And I think that's exactly what the NBA wants. And while I don't know that their ratings will be good for this finals, the regular season being so wide open and the playoffs being wide open, I think that's good for the league.
Oh, without question, it's more wide open than ever because now you've had 5 straight years with different champions, right? You went from Toronto to the Lakers to Milwaukee. Golden State, I get, but they were several years removed from their prior championship, and now you've got Denver. So it's more wide open than it's ever been. Where every year for it felt like a decade, you knew LeBron was going to represent the East, and San Antonio, the Lakers, or Golden State were going to represent the West, and that kind of shut off a lot of other contending teams.
Yeah, it did. So we're going to wrap up, but make sure you're listening to the podcast throughout the offseason because just because the NBA championship is over, that just means it's the start of all this stuff, Sap. It's probably the most exciting time in the NBA, the offseason, with the draft and free agency and trades and rumors and speculation and players doing crazy things. So we're going to be here covering all of it throughout the summer at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. So make sure you check that out. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. And we are also going to be on this summer on Wednesdays on Live Take Sports. Download that app, Live Take. And we're going to be doing shows around Wednesdays at 5, ish, presenting a topic or two for debate. So you're going to want to listen to that. And we'll tweet that out as well. And yeah, we're excited for a busy NBA offseason. We'll be previewing the draft that's coming up imminently. Very excited for Victor Wembanyama to join the NBA and the San Antonio Spurs. So much to talk about. Make sure you keep it here. Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage, and we will talk to you all later. See you, everybody.